games continue to change and game design paradigms continue to shift, and
Yeah.
what people expect as players continues to shift.
Hello and welcome. My name is Karosh, and on this channel, I have conversations with amazing people that are involved in game development to learn about and share their stories about their craft. And today, I am joined by one such individual. I had the pleasure of experiencing a game he was a part of making and hand in hand in. And Doug, could you please introduce yourself and tell the fine folks who you are, what you do, and what is Super Space Blank?
With pleasure. My name is Doug Zwick. I am a professor of game production at the DigiPen Institute of Technology in Redmond, Washington. So I teach people how to make video games. I also attended DigiPen as a student. I started in 2011, and in I think the summer of 2012, I think it was, or so, a couple of my friends who were also students there, they were a year ahead of me, were making a game, Super Space Blank, and they wanted some music for it. They wanted to use, the Blue Danube. It's that da 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 dum dum
Yeah.
dum dum dum, and it's famous because it was used in 2001: A Space Odyssey for all these scenes of these like humongous, majestic spacecraft and space stations and stuff. All these like really carefully orchestrated and planned maneuvers where they're like the one thing is docking with the other thing with great precision despite their huge size, and it's like this beautiful big space ballet.
Yeah.
And so it uses this waltz, and it's very famous for doing that, right? And so in Super Space Blank, you in case the audience isn't aware, you play. It's a very abstract game, but it's kind of vaguely in space because the title implies that. And you basically are in control of what you could call a ship. It's kind of a little rectangle or an abstract geometric shape, and you are in control of one of up to four gun turrets that are mounted around the outside of the ship. And the way that you move the ship is by firing in the opposite direction that you want to move in. And it's just a really simple physics-based game. So when you shoot, you move, you also rotate. You can get kind of like, it's pretty easy to kind of get spinning out of control and stuff like that.
Yes, it's very deceptively simple.
Oh God, yeah. And you're constantly you're trying to cooperate with your teammates, but you're also really kind of competing with them because you also are trying to shoot things and get points and stuff. And so it's so easy to just crash into things and end your game in the least graceful manner possible. That like they saw that the devs saw this humor in using the Blue Danube because it evokes the same
elegance,
exactly it's this ironic use of it to hopefully tap into what people's expectations of that song are for having heard it in 2001. And so for a while they had a recording of that from our sound library that they were using, and they I think they applied some filtering to it to just like make it sound kind of staticky and worse, and it was a funny thing because obviously they're trying to say it's like, oh yeah, it's like the low rent version of Blue Danube. But then they knew that I do NES chiptune, and they thought it would be kind of cool for me to make music for it. And so they asked me if I could please write an NES chiptune version of the Blue Danube. And so naturally I was very excited about the prospect, and I set about doing that, and I worked really hard, and I made this 10-minute version of that piece, and it's what they used. And so that was my involvement. Was just I made that. I also made when the game first boots up and it tells you to like to play with gamepads. I think it is. There's some splash screen at the beginning. They use the famous THX sound.
Yeah.
But I made that also in Family Tracker, and so it's it's a NES chiptune version of that as well. And and then one other thing, I also made the title screen music, which is just like it sounds like the orchestra tuning up. So like they're getting ready to play the Blue Danube. And that was the full extent of my involvement in that game. In the production of it. Because then what happened was, if I can go a little bit further with this.
Yeah, keep going. Tell me.
So let me see. That was in the summer when I was working on it. I think I finished it sometime in the fall. and then I added a few more things here and added a few more things there, and then they began to submit it to festivals and competitions and things,
Right.
and it got picked up by a couple. It went to, it got into the IGF, the Independent Games Festival, an annual thing that happens at GDC in San Francisco, and it also got accepted into Indiecade, which is a really excellent independent games festival. I don't know if it's a competition, but it's definitely a festival down in California, and so they got to the game got into those things, so I got to go to those things too, and so besides being involved in the production the way that I was, I also helped kind of rep it at these shows, and I was at the booth and I was playing it with people, and I had a really fun time playing it with all kinds of people. I mean, I love playing the game too. I happen to be one of its biggest fans as well as being the composer, and so I got to play with just random passersby as they wandered by the booth, and it was a lot of fun. And Jeff Gerstmann of Giant Bomb.
Yes.
Yeah, he was at the at GDC when I was there, and I was like, oh my god, it's Jeff Gerstmann. I got to get him to play this game. And so I was so awkward about it. I was just so bad at this, and I kind of went up and was like, hey, you should play our game. And he was like looking at his phone or a notepad or something, and he was like, yeah, okay. And then he walked away or something like that. It was so just unceremonious rejection. It was
you shoot your shot. I know that feeling myself. I think good on you for doing that. That's
thank you.
You got to do stuff like that.
I appreciate that. But yeah, so it was accepted. It got into the IGF in the category of like I think excellence in design, and it was up for the award. You know what I mean? And then we're not talking about the student category here either, which is kind of awesome. And so it was just the full thing. And I got to go to the show, and it was this like an awards show. Like they have like the
ceremonies and everything.
Yeah, exactly. MC up on stage, and there's like he's like announcing the categories and all this stuff. Like the Oscars or whatever.
Yeah.
And I got to sit at a table with like people. I think I was at a table with oh god, I'm gonna have to turn in my indie card because I don't remember the names of these people. But the guy who made Super Hexagon. You know what I'm talking about? That phone game?
Yes, cool. That game comes to mind when I think of a lot of what you guys also did too. Like there's a lot of parallels.
Exactly. So our game was like, it was up for that award against him and that game and FTL. Like there was not the slightest chance in hell that we were going to win this thing. And I think FTL was the one that won. But it was so cool though, just to get to sit there, and we had like an open bar, and I was drinking champagne and chatting with these guys, and it was just excellent. And then and there was that, and then there was the Indiecade, which is also super fun show.
Indiecade's a great show. I've been to that one.
You've been there, yeah. Okay, that's awesome.
And, I love it. I love it from the sense of, in my experience, it was largely a lot of student projects. I think that's what they like to highlight, and seeing the ideas that come out, it's like unfiltered, and it's just like, just give your peers, like, it took what I love about PAX and just was even more hyper focused about, like, just do wild ideas.
Exactly, because PAX has some of that, like especially at the Indie Mega Booth and stuff.
Yes.
But also, I mean, PAX is a trade show, or kind of. I mean, it's you got huge companies.
You have Nintendo, you have Bandai Namco, you have those.
So there's no, So it's like, and even at the Indie Mega Booth, it's still like, okay, this is great. A lot of indies with a lot of cool ideas, but still at the same time, they are literally there to promote their game they're trying to sell.
Yeah.
Whereas at Indiecade, it's a pure art show. It's like, it's basically like the Bumbershoot of indie games, and it's just a bunch of people there who made this cool thing that they have no intention of trying to sell, or a few of them do, but they're not. It's not the focus. They're there to do some weird thing. When I was there was a game that was it was Pong, but the way you played it was they actually had a tennis court set up. I don't think it was full size, but anyway, with a net, and they had two Kinects that were facing like each facing the other side.
Right.
And so you'd stand there and you'd wear these headphones, and you could hear the ball, like it was making like a pulsing sound, and you could hear where it's coming on the left or on the right or whatever. And so you would move around side to side. You were the paddle, but you couldn't see the ball, and the Kinect could see you, so it knew where you were to make the ball bounce. So
Okay.
you're just trying to use your ears to move back and forth, side to side, and bounce the ball off of you that you can't even see, and hope you bounced it. And then meanwhile, on the side of the net, facing away from both players, was a laptop that was actually showing the ball and where it was like where the paddles were that were being controlled by the players.
Yeah.
So something like that, like no one's going to sell that, and that wasn't the intention, but it was.
But it's
so
the
much
early
fun.
stages of what we would, like in Tron, where they're
Yeah.
having the disc fighting. That is, to me,
Yeah,
it's like the earliest form of that. This is the stepping stone for us to get to that kind of stuff.
Exactly, because naturally, obviously, that is the ultimate goal of game development, is to get to the discs of Tron. Like that's what we're really everyone has been shooting for the past 40 years. So, and by the way, I want to mention real quick here. So at Indiecade, one of the like luminary dignitary guests they had, I think he was So first of all, they had Brenda Romero's husband was there, and he was the one who was interviewing their luminary, who was Steve. Oh crap, Steve. Oh my goodness, the guy who invented Space War. Like one of the earliest fathers of video games. You know what I mean? Like when you talk about the history of video games, and you talk about who were the people who started this whole thing.
Yeah.
His name comes up, and for some dumbass reason I don't remember it. Probably the same reason why I can't remember the guy who made Super Hexagon.
You just met too many amazing people. It's hard to keep
exactly. That's right. And so, so he's the one who created the Space War. This is this like OG, spaceships fighting each other, flying around in space thing. And we got him to play our game, and it was so cool. And he kicked a bunch of butt. It was really neat. So that was fun.
Nice. Yeah. For my experience, where I came, this is many years after this game has first been developed. It was this past year, 2023, PAX West. I went, which is a convention, like we said, it's all kinds of indie games, but there's also like larger style games, like from Bandai, from Nintendo, from wherever. And my friends and I were going to the new hall in the new built part of the convention center.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And that's where it seemed like there was the plethora of just like all kinds of indie games there, and like you could just kind of like feast on all of it. And
nice.
We were looking for all kinds of stuff, and we came across this one had a lot of buzz. We heard a lot of just noise coming from this area, both from the game and from folks playing it. And it caught our eye. We're like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we sat down, and I don't think it won an award from us. We were and that was kind of what brought this whole connection together. Was we were trying to highlight and showcase games that we thought really stood out to us. And this game was amazing in the sense that it frustrated us with each other because of that whole, like, you're cooperatively trying to survive, but each individual is trying to also rack up their highest points in the process.
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes we get caught up in that, and we're like, you're gonna kill us all if you keep trying to get up points. And it's just kind of like a you versus everyone kind of thing. And it just we got hooked, and it really resonated with me. So
I'm glad to hear that.
That's how I got connected with yourself and through Digipen and everything. But I wanted to know, just like going back to the development side of it.
Sure.
You said you said that initial pitch of that song. Was there anything else that really you found drew yourself to want to work on this project, or was that primarily, or where did things start? Was it largely a conversation? Do you know these students prior, or could you explain a bit?
Sure, absolutely. So like I said, they went to school at the same time I was there.
Okay.
They were a year ahead of me, and this is Alex Bard and David Scamehorn.
Okay.
Alex Bard, by the way, he was working on Due Process. That's another like indie game that was kind of got some buzz for a while. I'm not sure if they're still working on that, if they finished it or what, but Due Process is a pretty cool game. Maybe check that out too.
Okay.
But anyway, and then David now works for some company in Japan. But while they were these two guys are like if you picture an artsy game designer, who's like smart and wants to do something cool and like clever, but also like artistic or somehow innovative or clever or whatever with games. Like this is these guys, all right.
Okay.
And so they were friends. They decided to work together on this game. At first, I think it was a solo project from one of them, and then they got permission or whatever from the game class to to turn it into a group project.
Okay.
And then they kept working on it for quite a long time. And so it was at DigiPen at the time we had this club. It was a playtesting club, and basically every twice a week there was a block of time where any student could bring a game to set it up on the computers they had there, and people could wander by, and if someone played your game, you would like punch their card or whatever, and then if you get 3 punches, then you can swap it out at the table for a meal card, and then you would get a free meal.
Oh,
And
nice.
so it was a great way to incentivize people to come and playtest games, and then people got to have playtesting data for their games, and so they would always have this game there, and they were really good about playtesting all the time. And so my friends and I were frequently checking out, what's the latest stuff they've got on that game, and they were always doing something cool and weird and new. And so that's how I found out about it in the first place.
Okay.
And it was just a really cool game. Like, I just really enjoyed any opportunity I had to play test it. And they were always doing something, unique with it and cool. And there's a lot of stuff they tried out that they cut. They had at one point they had a mode where, because you play it with 4 players, each
Right.
person with their own gamepad. And it's such simple controls. You have a stick to control your aiming direction, and you have a button that fires, and that's it. So they actually tried a mode where it was an 8-player mode, and you plug in 4
Oh my
gamepads.
God.
And yes, and one gamepad controlled 2 turrets, and so one person would put their left hand on the left side, and a different person would put their right hand on the right side, and they have you have a stick, and you use the bumpers to shoot. And the funny thing about that is that it was actually too easy,
Really?
because well, when you average out like the amount of force that any one person imparts to the ship,
Right.
it became too like democratic. Like, someone could do something to try to act in some sort of a selfish way or whatever, but everyone else would very easily be able to just completely
Course
counteract
correct
what they're
it.
trying to do. Yeah, and so it became this like, and one of the neat things about that game is that you get this group. I don't know how to say it. This group psychology thing where you without speaking, you're able to kind of like get the ship to move where you want it to go, and so, when you kind of get into a groove with your team.
Yeah,
And that
if everyone's on the same page of like, we need to
yeah,
survive, that intuitively just clicks, it seems. Like,
exactly.
it took me and my friends a couple of tries, but once we start getting the hang of it, we're like, okay, survival is the key thing. Individual needs might, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Exactly. And so in this case though, with the 8 players,
Yeah.
it was like that happened so much faster and it's so much easier, and it just kind
Mm.
of dropped the challenge. So they were amazed by this phenomenon, but they decided not to include it in the game.
Oh, okay.
But one really neat thing I want to point out, in case the viewers don't know, is that the clever thing they did to tutorialize the players is when you start a game, the first thing you get is, how iPhones used to have that slide to unlock thing, right?
Mhm.
You would press the button to wake up your phone, and then you have this thing you need to slide across the screen to unlock it. And so they had that to start the game. Normally in the game, if you crash into the red walls around the sides, you die, and that's game over. But in this, you start out with gray walls that are safe to bump into, and you have this slide to unlock thing in a screen, and it doesn't tell you that's it. It doesn't tell you anything else. The players just have to figure out at that moment that when I shoot, the ship moves in the opposite direction, and when
Ah.
I move onto the little button thing that I need to slide, the ship will it will attach itself to the ship, and then as I move the ship, it'll move with it, and the players have to figure that out. And so it's a way to teach the players how to control the ship in a safe environment with this weird little puzzle thing that kind of sets the tone for like what's going to come. It's going to
Yeah.
throw all these weird at you, and I thought that was a super clever thing. That was another thing I really liked about it. That
I like
made me
that.
want to work.
I like that a lot. Yeah, it reminds me of like just the fundamentals of like a lot of game design that I would imagine you guys are going through in the concepts. Where
Mm.
no, where if, for me as an outsider, the area I see that most highlighted is like the early Mario games, the first levels. You just
exactly.
left to right, basic jumps, and then it builds on those concepts.
And it teaches you how to play with the game you're playing.
Yeah.
That was something that we as game design students, like I'm pretty sure every single DigiPen game design student went through at some point, some professor telling them, hey, let's examine Super Mario Brothers 1-1 and look at how it teaches, And so that's something that we always are trying to it's the gold standard of teaching the player is
Okay.
giving them game design and level design that sort of you can't get past this part unless you prove you know how to do this thing.
Yeah.
That's a very standard thing to do in games, and putting something like that up front where you can't get into the game until you prove that you can work together as a team to get through this thing is a really clever move for this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that. Like when they had us do the demo, it was just kind of jumped straight into it. I didn't
Yeah,
get a
well,
chance to see something like that, but seeing other people play was kind of our okay, let's figure it out kind of thing.
yeah, and that's the other thing. Exactly at a show setting like that, where you're gonna walk up, and you're probably gonna stand behind the couch where there's already 4 people playing.
Yeah.
You get a chance to learn what's going on just by watching it. I think. I mean, I could tell how to play this thing without them telling me from the in its earliest pre-alpha days, because I don't know, I've played around with physics simulations before, and it wasn't too hard to understand what was going on. And it's one of those things where it's like, as soon as you begin playing it, you're like, I see why this is such a cool game.
Yeah, I think
And
there's something interesting about that of what first, I don't know, I'm curious what you think on this in the sense of like how quickly and intuitively something picks up for you control wise and game mechanic wise for someone who has a variety of game experiences versus someone who comes in, has maybe little to no prior game experience and is like, can I learn this?
yeah,
Is it communicating its ideas to me? And I think capturing, being able to like catch a wide enough net to to communicate that to both types of audiences, both types of mindsets
yeah,
is always interesting to me. I'm wondering,
it's a
is
big challenge.
yeah,
Yeah, so in my experience, yeah, I mean, I've been playing video games for a super long time, and so uh, honestly, more than any kind of formal training or whatever, that's where my ability to know how to play a game comes from. Is just the fact that I've been a gamer for so long.
mm,
But so when I pick up a game and I can figure it out like that, it works for me. And then I'll have like I'll tell some friend or whatever, oh man, you got to play this game. A good example for me is like Zelda 2, which is a super hard NES game, right?
yeah,
And it's got this reputation for being tough as nails.
yeah,
I love that game, and I played it a lot when I was a tiny kid, and I played it enough in my earliest years to be able to like get like something about it made me want to keep playing it despite how hard it was. And so by the time I have the earliest memories that I can recall about that game, I already knew how to play it because I was playing it so early. And so when I play that game, I know what I'm doing. I know how to play it. I'm good at it. And I tell someone else, "Oh man, you got to play Zelda 2," and they can't get through it. They can't get into it at all because they can't figure it out. And it's not just the difficulty, but it's like you have to know how to do certain things in this game that you have to know how to time your jumps and how to time your attacks and which cues to look for to decide when to like do a low stab versus a high stab or whatever else. And so that's something that like I definitely can see in other people, this thing where it's like, well, why can I play this game and they can't? And it's just because I just know how and I am able to pick that kind of thing up, and not everyone can. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that like I'm bragging or whatever. It's
no,
just
it
this thing
comes
that
through
like, yeah,
experience,
yeah,
just
exactly.
like someone who's seasoned and experienced in one field and someone who's kind of fresh into it or
Yeah.
isn't as familiar with it, that tends to happen.
And so it's
um
it's a big challenge. Let me just finish this thought.
yeah,
Finish this thought real
absolutely,
quick.
absolutely.
It's just a big challenge when you're trying to design a game that like I mean, these days you're not supposed to make a game like that. You're supposed to make a game that people can figure out, and you're supposed to make a game that teaches people. And it would be considered a flaw to make a game that is like Zelda 2, because they don't do enough to like teach you. And someone who got turned off by it and exited the experience, they would maybe very rightfully go to some review site and say, I'm giving this game 3 out of 10 or whatever, because of I couldn't learn how to play it because it doesn't do enough to teach you early enough or whatever.
Mm.
And so but at the same time, then you have people who do know how to play and they can figure it out quickly. And so knowing how to deal with a situation where some players are going to be better at this stuff and some are not, it's a tough balancing act, and
Yeah,
you have
it's
to like
definitely
have
a
all these
balancing act.
dynamic difficulty things you can opt into or whatever, or whatever else. And so, but with something like Super Space Blank, it's really just kind of a like get thrown in the deep end kind of a thing where where like I hope, it's like the designers are saying, I hope that you can figure this out. If you can't, you probably aren't going to want to play it for very long. But if you can, then we know you're going to be hooked and you're going to want to play it for a really long time.
Yeah, and
And
to me, part of that, again, to draw back to your involvement, the music was also it adds to an ambiance. I think a
oh,
lot of time
thank
it
you.
gets overlooked in some games where it's like, oh, we just have some light thing here, just
Mm,
something in the background. But sometimes it enhances, in my eyes,
mm,
when you have a game with a good complementary audio and musical experience. I was curious for you,
mm.
how is I know you kind of you highlighted at the start, was that musical development process at the beginning, were there any particular challenges that you saw, like adapting that tune, or how it fit with the tone of the game, or just any
Sure.
aspects of it? Was there any
Yeah.
challenges that you'd want to share or speak to?
Let me see. It's been a long time, so
Sure.
I'm sure I can get you something there. I mean, definitely there were challenges. Of course, there were challenges. It's you know, so here I was. I don't know if you're familiar with NES chiptune or with FamiTracker in particular, but
I'm familiar with
it's
chiptune, not so much Themi
yeah,
track.
FamiTracker. It's just a program that's commonly used to make NES songs,
Okay.
and I by choosing to work with this, I
Hmm.
was kind of opting into some really strict constraints in what I have available to me, and
Hmm.
you only have access to the different audio channels that the NES has, and I was using the VR6 expansion module, which I won't get into that, but it gives you three more channels. And so I had a total of 8 channels, and then you can only use some of them in certain ways, and so I had all these restrictions on me and and what I was doing. And it's I mean, I could have just not used FamiTracker, but that's the only thing I really have a lot of fluency in making music. So,
Okay.
and that's what they specifically asked me to use. And so anyway, so here I am doing this thing, and I downloaded I found a PDF of the full score of Strauss's Blue Danube. All right, and so I had the score, the orchestral score, and I had a YouTube video that was just a recording of the piece. And so I would constantly like I would play it and I would study the score and look at it and decide what am I going to do here, because there's like here we have a part that's like got whatever 20, or I mean not maybe not 20, but 12 or so parts are all stacked up on here,
Hmm.
and that's a bunch of different things all happening at once, and I only have these 8 channels. And also to be strictly clear here, one of them is a noise channel. You can't really use it for like chromatic instruments, and another one is a DPCM channel. It's a sample channel, and you typically don't use it for chromatic stuff either because of these reasons I won't get into. And so I really only had 6 channels that I could use for like you know strings or horns or whatever, and I'm trying to decide how to like what to ignore and
Okay.
what to put in. But also at the same time, by the way, I really wanted to make this something that I would be really super proud of, and I didn't want to make it just be like a pure like what's the word, faithful adaptation of this piece. I wanted it to be
You want to give
cool.
it that Doug touch.
Well, that Doug touch, exactly. Thank you, thank you. Exactly, the Doug touch TM, right? But I wanted to what I really wanted to do was I wanted it to sound like what people kind of hope to hear when they get a NES chiptune piece, which is typically it's going to sound like a 80s NES game or a 90s NES game, and it's going to have like cool stuff going on and neat little arpeggio things, and
Okay.
stuff that sounds like a Mega Man game or something like that. And so I didn't want to just be boring with it, I guess is really what I'm trying to say. And so I tried to add a lot of things, and when I was deciding which instruments to use here, it wasn't always just like, well, what am I gonna cut out? It's more like, what am I gonna replace with something cool?
Okay.
What how am I gonna treat this section? That song has it's this waltz. It's really really long compared to relative to like typical pop music these days, right?
Mhm.
And it's got uh, just section after section after section, and they're all like it's a unique melody for this part and a unique melody for that part, but they're all another waltz and roughly the same tempo, and it's good stuff, but it's also like it's emblematic of its time in that it's another waltz section and then another waltz section and then another waltz section, and so what I wanted to take the opportunity to like say this part is going to sound like this thing and this next part's going to sound totally different, and so on. And I had one part where I like embellished and threw in what I wanted it to sound kind of like a violin solo, and so I just like kind of like dropped all the other instruments out and I put this in here. And that wasn't in the original, and I had
Okay.
fun with that, you know. And I had another section in like about at the 6 minute mark that's just this really long extended like it takes the melody of that part like a I don't know like 4 bars of the melody there, and it just loops them over and over and over again and adds more and more layers to it, and I think it's really pretty, and I wanted to have this be this like cool like unexpected feel good moment of the piece, you know. And
Yeah.
I always have in my mind that like maybe when players get to that part, maybe they'll also happen to be on a roll, you know,
Yeah.
and then they'll hear this music and it'll like inspire them and they'll get into it, you know. And I can't make sure that happens, but if it does happen and someone gets that, like that's gonna be very memorable for them.
Yeah,
And it's gonna
those
be this
moments.
epic. Yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
presenting it up to them, and it's up to them if the moments line up and everything. That's cool. Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Nice. I wanted to
Yeah.
also kind of get a sense, like, you know, from what you described, the game was already being like you'd seen what it looked like in its early stages, and
Yeah.
then you added the music through it.
Right.
As you were going, was the development of the game, was there ever any back and forth of like, in the sense of, oh, we're doing this differently with the game, and that impacted or influenced your music, or vice versa? Did your music
Mm.
influence anything with aspects of the game, whether it be its franticness or it? Do things like do conversations like that come up, or is it
They,
case by case in your experience? Or can you share?
yeah. You know, so typically conversations like that do come up. In this particular case, we might have talked about a few things that were along those lines, but
Okay.
ultimately there really were no major changes in the design that influenced my music or vice versa.
Okay.
Thankfully, right? I mean that it would have. I mean, I don't know. We would have had a better story to tell, I guess, if they did.
No, I mean
But
it's interesting
no,
because
yeah,
sometimes you hear it is a back and forth, and that is part of the dynamic of it. And other
yeah,
times it's
that does
like we
happen.
have a very clear vision, and you have a very clear answer, and it's like you just connect and boom.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So in this case, it was mostly that like they knew what they were doing. They had a pretty clear vision of what the game was, right? And you know the main thing that was left for them to continue to develop
Hmm.
after like they kind of got the initial core systems off the ground, you know, were I mean obviously they could continue to tweak them and subtly change how much force is imparted by this turret and whatever, you know, and uh, but but also just adding more content, you know. And the way the game
Yeah.
works is like, you know, you go through, you clear out one, you know, one wave or whatever, and then it randomly chooses another wave, and then what it'll do is it'll also like eventually you get to where it kind of like dynamically combines waves, and so you'll have one wave and then it'll also roll another one, and
Mm.
they're happening at the same time. So you'll have this thing where you have like, I don't know, a bunch of they call them asteroids, a bunch of asteroids coming in from one side you're supposed to shoot, and then meanwhile you have like a bunch of red stuff that's going to kill you coming from over
Yeah.
here, and then maybe there's something that's like coming in from the background, like from the, you know, towards
Oh,
you,
from
you
the
know what I mean?
background to the
Yeah,
foreground.
they do a couple of things like that too, and so they have all these things like that happening, and they just had like once they were working on once they gotten past the main systems, it was mostly a matter of just adding more and more and more of that, you know, as long as they could.
Mm.
And so um anyway, so I'm saying all this because why am I saying this? Because th- like they knew what they basically were trying to make more stuff that was going to fit in what in their vision they already had.
Okay.
I think they gotten past the point early enough on that they knew that they had a good vision, so they no longer needed to prototype the like main core vibe. They were like, cool, we got it, let's go with it, let's just add stuff that fits with that, rather than continuing to experiment and see if we can go in this other direction. They never really needed to do that anymore by the time I was on the project.
Okay.
And so that really kind of aided the fact that there was no really need for me to worry that there was going to be a dramatic shift in what the game was all about. And then also, you know, I mean, kind of vice versa. I was never like I would finish a section, show it to them, you know, and they'd say, "This is cool, but can you change that or whatever? You know, can you add more of a I don't know." They would give a few um, notes for me, and then, but mostly, like they knew what they were getting into with asking me for this. They knew I was going to giving them a chip tune, and it was going to be this particular piece, and it's going to be pretty long, and so it was mostly a matter of just let's just keep going, and Doug will finish up his thing when he finishes it, and that's kind of how it went.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And so now, just kind of looking, and at the time, you got everyone was students, during the development?
Yes.
So now you're involved in helping other students in
Yeah.
at DigiPen. What
Yeah.
does that look like? Like, what do you see? Did you share stories like this? What do you see about the landscape? Is a lot of similar impassioned folks different? Like, can you share any insights on
Yeah, sure.
you
So you
from
want to know, like,
your perspective now as
sure.
in the education of game development?
Sure. You're asking me to compare my prior experience as a student to the to what I see as the
What
student experiences these days, or
Yeah, like
well,
what looks the same, what looks different from this perspective that you have now,
got
from
it.
then and now?
Yeah. Okay. You got it. Well. Okay. So let's see. First and foremost, the school itself has look. We continue to get better every year, and we have a totally brand new design curriculum that has a lot of new stuff in it. There's a lot more uh, faculty with a lot more like expertise in different I guess different areas of design, game design,
Okay.
and if all of us who made that game were here as students now, like we would, I think we'd all be even better. We would really benefit from all that stuff. Um, and so there's that. Besides that, though, also like games continue to change and game design paradigms continue to shift, and
Yeah.
what people expect as players continues to shift, and what people expect as what people sorry, what I'm trying to say. Like the kinds of games people will go on to work on. Let's put it that way, right?
Mhm.
If I'm a game designer and I'm learning how to make games, I'm not just learning how to like make a game that people are going to love and it's going to touch them somehow and they're going to feel really cool and have some epic moment. I'm also learning how to design stuff that like people are going to want. When I say people, I mean like studios, like publishers are going to want from an employee,
Mhm.
and that is also shifting too, not just based
Mm.
on the like tastes of players, but based on the industry,
Yeah.
and
People wanna
that's
have careers.
exactly, and
Yeah.
so a lot of that is is steered not just by like paradigms and stuff, but also just kind of by business, and that's
Yeah.
super frustrating in some ways, but it does make sense also. And so that I can't I can't name any. I wish I could. I can't name any specific examples of this happening, but
Sure.
I definitely have felt this subtle tide shift, and so I'm not sure if people you know would be as quite as inclined to make this like super fringy, weird. No one's going to want to like buy this artistic, bizarre, competitive, cooperative game like they made back then.
Mhm.
Maybe it would be a little bit less likely for people to want to try to spend what otherwise would have been their sophomore and junior years, these two opportunities they have to like really make a cool 2D and 3D portfolio piece or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They might have been more inclined to get on a team that's going to make something like that and make a game in Unreal or whatever.
Okay.
So and let's see what else is different. The well, certainly I mentioned Unreal. I mean, back then Unreal was an option, but I think it was like really expensive or something like that. And it wasn't until like actually, I think it was the year that I went to GDC with Super Space Blank that Unreal became, or it might have been the year after that, that Unreal became free for people who aren't going to make a lot of money with their game, and that was this huge power play on the part of Epic, and Unity was still charging,
Mm.
and so that was something, and the Super Space Blank itself was made with a game engine called the Zero engine. It was engine being developed by our school. And so that was kind of like it wasn't trying to use something else out there, but that was really convenient because, of course, they didn't want to pay for Unity. They didn't want to. They definitely didn't want to pay for Unreal. No one in Digipen was making games with Unreal back then. And these days, Unreal is actually like it's kind of one of the only options you have when you're in the junior year. Like we say you must make a game with either Unreal or your Unity, or we might allow a couple other commercial engine options.
Okay.
And so a lot of people are gonna say, okay, cool. I'm gonna grab Unreal. I'm gonna make some really awesome, epic looking, beautiful, high fidelity 3D thing with PBR and lighting, crazy stuff, and all this. And that's a thing you can go and try to do. And
Yeah.
back then, that was just really not an option,
Yeah,
for
it's
anyone.
accessible now to
It's
these.
accessible,
Yeah.
exactly. That's right. Yes, and so I think that's a big change also. Let's see, anything else is different.
It's interesting to me just from what
Mhm.
you've been sharing on that those insights and the lessons you're trying to impart as an institute of
Yeah.
like it's not it is an important aspect to for the artistic side of it of like the game designs but also the business and industry aspects of it
Yeah,
because
yeah.
people want to do this, they have the passion to do this for, hopefully a living. And I think, I mean, just from my experience, like having talked to folks I knew that were in game development many years ago, I'm sure even more so for yourself, it's like kind of a wild, wild west in some ways of like you don't know. There's
Yeah.
not so much a curriculum in the past. It's like you figure it out and it's case by
Yeah.
case. Now I feel like with more folks with their experiences imparting it to future students and
Mhm.
aspiring folks, that guidance goes a long way in providing some sustainability, hopefully.
Absolutely. Digipen used to be one of the only, like, and when I say one of the only, I mean there were us and maybe one or two others,
Mhm.
schools out there who had, like, colleges out there who had specific curriculum in game production or game development or design or whatever. And we offer 4-year degrees that are very specific to making video games, and there are more of there's it's a wider uh, ecosystem for that these
Yeah.
days, which I think is great. Like, personally, I don't know what the official opinion is of the company I work for, but I think it's great. I love seeing that because it means that we're all kind of inspired by each other and we can
Yeah.
learn from each other and we can compete with each other. Uh,
Rising tide lifts all.
yes, exactly right. Yes, yes, yes. And so I love that. But back then, and I say back then, I mean a long time ago. It was very little of that. And like you said, it was like you just have to. It was sort of a sink or swim thing,
Mhm.
and you had to try your best to learn this stuff on your own. And the thing I always think about is the fact that, like, there are, when you go to your whatever the Switch eShop or the Steam or the PlayStation Shop, whatever, you can find hundreds and hundreds of indie games,
Mhm.
and some of them get popular and get big and people like them. They become these indie stars, right?
Uh-huh.
But there are so many people out there who want to be indie developers, and because there are so many, like 5 or 10% of them can find any success at all, and that still ends up being hundreds every year. You know what I mean? And so it's such a big ecosystem, but there's just the so many people are just crashing and burning left and right all around you, and I think that's maybe going to be less and less as the years go on because, first of all, there are more schools like us,
Mhm.
and there's also, I think, more access to, like, great resources to teach people how to make stuff. Even if you don't have the opportunity to go to a school about it, you
Mhm.
still have more and more and more access to, like, online courses and information and tutorials, and there's, like, more and
The
more YouTubers out there who are just like, my whole channel is about giving cool game design advice,
Yeah.
and I love to see that.
Before we end this, I wanted to ask one last question, just for
Mhm.
anyone who's aspiring, who's interested in getting involved in this, and doesn't know kind of where to go or is kind of in
Yeah.
the early stages of it. Do you have any guidance or insights for that
Okay.
type of
Yes,
individual?
yes, I do. So I would say the first thing you want to do is find your passion. Figure out what within this whole field that it is that you want to do. So, do you want to be a programmer? Do you want to be a designer? Do you want to be an artist? Producer, a sound designer, all kinds of stuff, right? Try all of that and see what really kind of, like, jumps out at you as feeling like you kind of like, the thing you can look for is you feel addicted to it. Like, if you find something that you enjoy doing, you're gonna like be preoccupied by the thoughts of going back to that again. You know what I mean? And that's what you want to look, that is this, like, clear indication that that's this passion for you. So first of all, find that. Okay. But then also, the honest answer is you cannot get good at this without doing it. So you absolutely cannot get good at making games unless you attempt to make games and you start a game and you develop it and then you finish it. Like, you have to go through these stages of it, and
Mhm.
then you move on to the next one, right? The earliest games you make, they're like push-ups. You shouldn't think of them as these portfolio pieces, these, like, babies, these things that are going to be really impressive to anyone at all. They're not there for that. They're there for your arms to get stronger, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just there to be exercises. you're going to make a few of these things. And my advice is make them as small as possible. Like literally get a title screen that has a menu that can take you into a game that has like one screen worth of gameplay that takes you to an end, and then you're done, right? And then the next one you make, maybe make it a tiny bit longer and add a couple mechanics. And the next one you make it a little bit longer and follow some tutorials and videos and see how you can add interesting gameplay. And then start playtesting and learning from, get feedback from your audience and learn what your audience is. And then as you go through this many, many times, you will inevitably either decide it's not for you and stop doing it, or get good at it. There are no two ways about it, or I guess there are two ways. There are no three ways about it. Right? There's no other option available. Is either of those two things. And so you have to just get in there and start making stuff. And that is the best advice of all. The best advice of all.
Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate your advice, and I appreciate the time you gave to me today for having this conversation. This was very insightful in ways I wasn't even expecting, both from your DigiPen perspective and student guidance, and also from the musical aspects on your involvement with this game. I wanted to ask, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to plug or direct people to anywhere in particular for folks to find you or anything?
Let me see. I don't know if I can actually. Okay, you know what? Oh man, I wish I could. I'll send you a URL. Okay, I'll send it to you on Discord. You can add it on visuals or whatever. Maybe,
yeah,
I don't know.
I
if
will
edit this and put it up. But basically, the guy who was in charge of the Zero engine,
yes,
for a long time. Which is what was used to make Super Space Blank. He now actually has it. It's available on the web. You can use it on the web, and I think he's gonna try to start a business that uses it in some fashion. Okay. And so I would say I want to plug that, because it'd be really cool if he got any kind of a influx of people showing up and making accounts and starting to use it. So I'd say I'll plug that.
Send that to me.
Of course. These days it's called the Ravery engine, and I forget what the URL is, but I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So go check that out, and you can use it on the web, and you can play around with it and make some fun little dinky little game or whatever. So that's what I'll do. I'll plug that.
Thank you, Doug. I'll make sure to put that in the notes and on the video when I put this out. And just to everyone listening, thank you for listening. I hope you found this conversation enjoyable. If you want to find similar conversations like this, you can look at my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kujoprime. And I hope you all have a great day.
Bye-bye.